Welcome to Rising Leaders of New York with your host, David Zwerin of Hill & Moin, LLP. They present to you conversations with today's and future leaders of New York City discussing the challenges and issues relevant to New Yorkers. You can find this show at www.hillmoin.com and on YouTube, LinkedIn, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and more. Now here are the hosts of Rising Leaders of New York.
Hello, everybody. My name is David Zwerin. I'm the senior trial attorney at Hill & Moin, LLP. We are a plaintiff's personal injury law firm focusing specifically on premises liability and construction accident cases for seriously injured victims. But I also get the pleasure of hosting this podcast, which is Rising Leaders of New York, where every episode I get to talk to important people on the cutting edge that you New Yorkers need to know about in the world of law and other topics. And this week we have an amazing guest, Neil Weinrib of the law offices of Neil Weinrib Associates. Neil is a very experienced immigration attorney, and immigration is an area that tends to be very relevant and highly connected to plaintiff's personal injury law firm, and has spent his career zealously advocating for the rights of foreign nationals and people here with various immigration concerns, going through a system that's very tricky and hard to navigate. I'm sure now more than ever, and what's happened over the last 5-6 years. I look forward to having a great conversation with Neil today. So Neil, welcome to the show.
Thank you, David. Happy to be here.
Neil, can you tell everybody a little bit about yourself? How did you end up becoming an immigration lawyer and starting your firm?
Sure, great question. It all started many years ago when I was in college with a trip to Israel as a foreign study program. And I realized that there was so much going on outside of Pennsylvania and the US, especially being in Israel and the Middle East back in the 70s. It was a very dynamic time, but it gave me the exposure to meet people of various cultures and backgrounds. And I found it fascinating. And I said, I like this a lot. I really want to do something that's global and international. And so when I came back to school at Penn State University, I was like, this is so insular. I've got to arrange to eventually get out of here and do something more worldly. I then took a master's in international law and international affairs at the Fletcher School of Tufts University. The goal at that time, I was going to get a PhD and become a college professor. And at that time, the teaching market started getting very crowded. And then I said, well, not a great market for PhDs. What should I do? I said, well, maybe I'll go to law school. My father's a lawyer. Why not? So from there, I went on to law school, which I didn't really love. And I was like, what am I doing here? It was only after I got out of law school and started practicing law that I said, this isn't bad. But I really want to get into an international practice. So I joined a firm after a year of doing general practice. I joined a firm that was doing immigration and various practice areas. And that's when I found my calling. I said, well, now I'm working with foreign individuals. At the time I got out of law school, there were very few opportunities for lawyers going into international law. There were only a handful of firms that were involved in international law, and most of their graduates were coming out of Harvard and Yale at that time. And so consequently, immigration law was very appealing to me. I realized and learned that I was helping foreign nationals achieve the American dream, even back in the 80s.
What was it about international law that you found so appealing, Neil?
Well, basically, just the fact of the entire global picture, dealing with foreign law systems versus the American legal system, in things that were affecting foreign nationals in various countries. And how the U.S. legal system was derived from the British system, and issues dealing with war crimes and things like that. It's just very interesting to me. But then on the immigration side, I got to meet people who had legitimate issues. At that time, Iran was going through a revolution. Jews were leaving or trying to leave the former Soviet Union. It was a very tumultuous time for U.S. immigration back in the 80s. There was a huge influx of people from Iran, Russia, and many other countries, Romania, the former Eastern Bloc countries. People were trying to get to the U.S. from Romania, Hungary, Poland, etc. And not to mention China, because then China started going through their issue, Tiananmen Square, much later in 1989. So the 80s were a very tumultuous time in U.S. immigration. And so I was entering a field that was just going through a lot of radical changes. And the foreign nationals were desperate to be in the U.S. America was going through a growth period, even though there was some signs of recession. But as bad as I've often said, as bad as it is around the world, it's much better in the U.S. America is always the land of opportunity, and America has been a magnet. Even today, it's the same thing. Despite everything we read in the newspaper and all the tumult and issues, America is still an attractive place for foreign nationals from everywhere. It continues to be a magnet.
How have you seen the immigration system evolve over the last few years, particularly since 2016 or the beginning of 2017?
It's been somewhat slow to evolve because in many aspects, our immigration quota system was formed in 1976, 1977. So the numerical allocations that allow foreign nationals in have been in place for 40 years, which is obviously outdated. That's why there are restrictions on people coming in, particularly from India and China. They wait much longer time. For example, if a U.S. citizen applies for a brother or sister, they're going to wait 14 years to come into the U.S. Unmarried children are going to wait 8 to 10 years because the system is somewhat antiquated. I often say it's like driving an old car. It works, but it moves very slowly. And that's our American immigration system. It's due for an overhaul. So then you throw into the mix the political situation going on in Central America, including Venezuela and Guatemala, various other countries, Brazil even now, Haiti. I mean, there's so much unrest going on in the world, Ukraine, of course, and many other countries, that America is still a magnet despite all of the difficulties to get in. So despite everything that goes on here, it's still a much better place and a land of opportunity for foreign nationals, especially in European countries where growth is limited. And in Asia too, because of established institutions and barriers. America still offers tremendous opportunity for foreign nationals. It really does. It's no different than it was before.
What are all the things you do for foreign nationals? Like, for those who aren't terribly familiar with immigration law, what are some of the issues you handle? What do clients come to you for?
Sure.
How do you help them?
Great question. Well, we handle the entire spectrum of U.S. immigration, including asylum for people from Ukraine, Russia, China, and other countries that are people who are facing persecution, Central America, etc. Plus, we handle people who are marrying American citizens, relative petitions, people petitioning for spouses, children, etc., parents. We also handle employment-related visas, people who are trying to come to the U.S. to live and work here. And that would include the entire spectrum, from people coming as temporary workers or seasonal workers to work in hotels and farms, to people who are principal dancers for the New York City Ballet. We handle the entire spectrum of extraordinary ability professionals, dancers, doctors, lawyers, engineers, scientists, writers, etc., musicians. So our firm is big enough. We have the bandwidth to handle the entire spectrum of U.S. immigration, and it's the demand is in every sector from what we see.
Now, we talked a little bit about this before the podcast. Immigration is something that comes up a lot in personal injury. Not everybody who gets injured in a personal injury action is a citizen or is here with documentation. What are some of the issues like you run into? Do you ever run into people who are foreign nationals? They're here, they lack some degree of documentation, and they have concerns about, should I bring a personal injury suit, and what would that mean for my immigration status?
Sure. Many foreign nationals, especially if their English is not great, or if their status is uncertain, may be severely injured but hesitant to bring an action because they don't know how it will play out. They have no definitive immigration status. I mean, we have people who are in the U.S. for many years without status. So sometimes they can be injured and somewhat afraid or reticent to bring an action. What they often learn is that they are eligible for Medicaid in New York. New York has very liberal Medicaid requirements, so they shouldn't be afraid to get necessary emergency medical treatment. And that's why New York, for example, is such a magnet to foreign nationals, including New Jersey and the New England states, whereas other states, especially down south, are much stingier in terms of Medicaid requirements, much shortened time periods to receive assistance. But foreign nationals, I believe, are increasingly recognizing that their rights are expanding. And so we're seeing less, I would say, reticence. But still, many of them are involved in construction accidents, car accidents, pedestrian, sidewalk, you name it, medical malpractice, etc. I mean, many of them are victimized. When they often contact us with various types of claims, we can send them to the right expert, like Hill and Moin. If our clients are injured, we know where to send them to specialists. They'll often ask me, can I recommend a specialist in a particular area, such as personal injury? And so we're often the starting point for a lot of foreign nationals who don't know where to go or where to turn.
And I'm sure you counsel your clients about this too. I imagine most of them are scared. Like you said, if you go to the hospital, if you go to Coney Island Hospital, are they going to be asking a client, what's your immigration status here? And if they say undocumented, are they going to be calling INS?
No, fortunately not. We've never seen that happen. New York has been a very safe venue for foreign nationals. I've never heard of anything like that happening, fortunately.
No, nor have I. It's a bit of a rhetorical question.
Well, it's a legit question because, for example, there was a time when if people were arrested by the police, let's say in various locales, including Nassau, Suffolk County, Westchester, Yonkers, the police might report them to Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE. And so people often got into trouble because of even minor criminal incidents involving perhaps DWI, driving while intoxicated, assault, battery, things like that. And therefore, people were often found themselves in a very difficult situation. But we're seeing now the police authorities are not actively cooperating with Immigration and Customs Enforcement. So it's very rare that happens now. But there was a time when it was a real threat. New York has been very welcome to foreign nationals, as we know, from people coming from the southern border. New York City is hosting a huge number of foreign nationals, which is straining social services at this point. And they're entitled to many social services, including food stamps and various forms of financial assistance.
A lot of things, a concern I seem to hear from immigrants is that, aside from that concern about, can I get medical treatment? Who will pay for it? And will I get in trouble doing it? I'm often hearing the concerns about, will the defense attorney report me? Will the insurance carrier report me? So certainly in my venue, I know people are always concerned, and those concerns are not founded. That's just simply not how personal injury cases go. Just because somebody lacks documentation doesn't mean they don't have rights.
No, correct.
In the state of New York, and they should bring a claim, and they shouldn't be afraid that an adversary is going to retribute just because they lack papers.
Well, definitely. Well, let me say this. There's been a big sea change since the Trump administration, where anybody who fell out of status or had no legal status was subject to deportation or removal. Biden came in and they changed that policy. So now immigration is only chasing after people who commit serious criminal actions, criminal acts, basically. So in other words, foreign nationals should be less afraid now than ever to report an accident or an injury or something like that, whereas in the past they might have been fearful of being reported to Immigration Customs Enforcement or ICE. Now they don't really have to worry because immigration enforcement is now prioritizing criminals, people committing serious criminal acts versus really minor acts. So it's a much better environment now for foreign nationals. They can pretty much rest assured that they're not in danger.
Well, that's certainly good to hear from my perspective, from what I do. I'm curious, in your practice, where do you go to litigate or handle these immigration matters, and how is the court system functioning to process what I'm sure must be just an immense amount of immigration matters in the past 5-6 years?
Yeah, definitely. People who are, let's say, stopped at the border are often referred for deportation removal proceedings. They may be issued notices to appear without date, and they're required to keep in touch with immigration as to their address for future hearings. But what's happened is that the entire system is so overloaded and clogged that people are waiting years to be called for their hearings. The Trump administration adopted, interestingly, a policy whereby they were prioritizing people who were newly arrested. They were getting priority over people who were waiting years to have their asylum claim heard, whereas new arrivals were put on an accelerated calendar. That's now changed. And again, because of the change in administrations, the Biden administration has been much more pro-immigrant to a degree. Of course, at the southern border, they're trying to toughen up and pass very restrictive rules and regulations to appease the American public because of the huge influx of foreign nationals since COVID. A combination of COVID and political events occurring in Central America that were tumultuous. So it's a perfect storm that's created and generated so much U.S. immigration, including Ukraine, Russia. We have Russian nationals coming in through the Mexican border because they're desperate to get out of Russia for fear of being forced into military service, for example. So we're seeing a huge stream coming, especially from the southern border, some coming from the northern border, from Canada, but predominantly from the southern border.
And I guess it varies based on the situation of the person seeking asylum or citizenship or a work visa, whatever it is. But it sounds like the system is still very backlogged. So I wonder, what do you think can be done to change it? People, obviously, politicians have been talking about immigration reform for decades. Do you think that's a thing that's actually ever going to happen? What would make it happen?
Sure. There was, I would say in the last 10 years or so, there were opportunities for reform. During the Bush administration, for example, he was a proponent for immigration reform, and then it got knocked down at the very, very end. Although the former president was very involved in immigration reform. The Obama administration was actually somewhat anti-immigration. They actually deported more people than Trump did in the first few years of the Obama administration. Biden sought election proposing immigration reform and positive change, and that quickly, I would say, dampened because of what happened during COVID with the huge influx of people coming in from Central America, Mexico, et cetera. And so things have really changed. We don't have the border wall, but the enforcement activities are still very strong. But people are still trying to come to the U.S. The U.S. is still a major magnet for foreign nationals.
Do you think anything is going to be changing in the years ahead? And so what's going to lead to actual immigration reform after so many administrations that say they will and doesn't happen?
Great question. I don't see anything happening in the next 2 years during the final years of the Biden administration. I think it would take a Democratic overhaul of both houses to result in any immigration reform. It's unfortunate that during Obama's first 2 years, he had a Democratic majority in the Senate and the House, but no immigration reform went through. It was a unique window and opportunity
Why was it? Why didn't they pass it in 09 and 10?
What's that?
Why do you think it stalled out in 2009 and 2010?
I really don't know. It just didn't have any gravitational pull for some reason. I think, why, my guess, the economy, banking crisis was
Makes sense.
front and center. I think that's why. In 2008 and 9, we were dealing with financial issues that were, outranking immigration. That's probably why it didn't happen. So now we have to wait and see what happens in the next presidential election, and to see if Democrats retake the House. I think if that is the case, that would be a prime opportunity for reform and change.
Very interesting. Well, thank you so much for joining me here today, Neil. I thought this was an amazing and enlightening conversation. I certainly learned a lot, and I hope all our listeners did too. For our listeners, if they want to get in touch with you, Neil, how might they do so?
Definitely, they can give us a call. Our number is 212-964-9282, and our email is info@nawlaw.com. We're happy to meet people. We're very proud of the fact that we provide honest and successful immigration services. There's a lot of fraud that goes on in our immigration legal community. A lot of our clients or people who come to us have experienced problems with lawyers who take their money and run. We don't advertise generally. We have a track record based on client referral, lawyer referral, and we have a large influx of people who know that they can depend on us for honest and effective immigration services. And we span the entire spectrum.
Well, thank you for everything.
Let me add, we have a terrific staff of very experienced lawyers and paralegals who are multilingual, including Spanish, Russian, and various other languages.
No, absolutely. Neil, I know Neil to be a tremendous immigration attorney. Our office knows him well. And thank you for everything you do for foreign nationals who need you to protect their rights, and for educating us as well as our clients on the tricky immigration issues they may face while they got personal injury matters. You provide an amazing service, and it's been great talking to you today, Neil.
Thank you, David. I should also add that we successfully took a case to the U.S. Supreme Court and won. We're one of the few immigration law firms that have had that accomplishment. We're very proud of that.
It should be. Well, thank you so much for joining me, Neil. My name is David Zwerin. Again, I'm the senior trial here at Hill & Moin, LLP. Our focus is on serious premises liability and construction accident cases. You can reach us at 212-668-6000. Otherwise, I hope you reach us by tuning in to this episode and all the others posted. And I look forward to speaking to you at the next episode, when I'll be joined by another great guest who is a rising leader of New York. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, David.
You've been listening to Rising Leaders of New York, hosted by David Zwerin of Hill & Moin, LLP. You can catch prior episodes at www.hillmoin.com and on YouTube, LinkedIn, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and more. Thank you for your positive reviews, comments, and sharing this show with others.